To those who are watching from C2, we greet you here in the sanctuary. I think, and they'll be in trouble if they're not there, my sister-in-law, along with my wife Valerie, are in C2, so be sure to greet her when you see her. For those who are around the country, and as I understand it, around the world, we welcome you and we are grateful for your ministry of presence, even online. And then we received message this morning that our youth group, who is on their mission, they have been invited by those who are local within the community to worship with them. So we're grateful for that as well. How many of you, by show of hands, ever find yourself even just a little bit concerned about the future? Just a little bit. Yeah. Not that there's anything to be concerned about. How many of you ever find yourselves a little bit concerned about what the next generation will inherit? Many of us. So what is it that our world needs? Is it a lack of information? There was a time that we thought through better education, we could eliminate the world's personal and social ills. We could eliminate poverty. We could eliminate war and even violence itself if we could just educate people properly. But we realized at the dawn of the 20th century that education and reason alone were not going to cure our personal and social ills. There are some who still place faith in technology if we can just further the advancements of technology, but we've come to realize that technology, like every power, is neutral. It can be used for good or for ill. And all too often, technology is used for the latter. So what is it that's going to save us from ourselves? I submit to you this morning that the only thing that can save us is wisdom born of love. Now, I hear those words. I can hear and anticipate what that may sound like to you. We just need wisdom born of love. Love, 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 love. Love is all we need. Wisdom is all we need. Another platitude offered by a preacher. But do we take wisdom seriously? Do we actually take wisdom seriously? How many of you have seen the movie Lost in Translation with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson? Toward the beginning of the movie, Bill Murray, who plays Bob, is having a conversation with Scarlett Johansson, and her name is Charlotte. There's some discussion about what each one does, and she says that she graduated from college the previous spring. And he says, "Oh, well, what was your major?" And she says, "Philosophy." And he says, "Well, I guess there's a buck in that racket, isn't there?" Which is funny, ha ha. But in a way, it's funny in a different way. Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom, philia sophia, the love of wisdom. Are we people who take wisdom seriously? We do live in an age of information, and it is often difficult for us to know which sources to trust. And it's not like there are no controversies in our world. Have there been any controversies this week even? Have there been any national controversies? Now, I imagine that there are at least two different perspectives in this room. Is he going to talk about this? My goodness, this is making me uncomfortable. Do we ever stop to think about the sources that inform our perspective? Is it possible that if we're not careful, we perceive the world, the events that take place in the world, in ways that are in our self-interest, or at least we perceive to be in our self-interest. It was several years ago, I was watching a national championship. It was a college national championship. It doesn't matter the sport. And there'd been a new rule that had been put into place, and if someone violated this rule, whichever athlete had violated the rule was automatically disqualified. Well, lo and behold, very early in the game, one of the star athletes was called and penalized based on this new rule, and immediately was ejected from the game. This was an important game, so they decided to go to the film and replay it. And they replayed it from every different angle and in slow motion. In the end, they decided that the call on the field was accurate. Now, when they announced this, being that it was a national championship, the crowd was equal parts for one team and another team. And so when the announcement had been made after further consideration that the player was indeed ejected from the game, those who were pulling for the team of that player in unison cried out, "Boo!" And the opposing team at this decision cheered, "Yeah! What was interesting about that was everyone was looking at the exact same thing. They weren't hearing about it secondhand. Many of them were physically present. They have those extraordinarily large screens now in these arenas. Everyone was looking the exact same thing, but they were divided based on their team. Sounds a little bit like our society, doesn't it? Anything that they say about our team must be wrong, no matter what the facts, no matter what it is that we're looking at. No matter how clear the evidence is. And if the opposing, think of that, the opposing, opposite. Why do we think in binaries in the first place? Us and them. Whatever is said that is negative about the other team must be right. Who or what will save us from ourselves? The psalmist says, "Teach me your ways. Show me your paths. God of steadfast love, unwavering love. God of unwavering, steadfast love, show me your ways. Show me your paths." And therein we learn something about wisdom. Wisdom is the will of God. Wisdom is knowing, recognizing, discerning the will of God. It's a disposition that is formed over time and not merely in a crisis or an emergency. Aristotle said it this way: the good of man, the good of men and women, is an activity of the soul in conformity with excellence and virtue. the good, the end at which all things aim, the ultimate goal of humanity, is an exercise, a practice of the soul in conformity with excellence and virtue. God of steadfast love, the highest virtue, steadfast love. Love that begins with the other in mind. Love that is disinterested in that it does not calculate what I will receive in return. It doesn't ask, what's in it for me? God of steadfast love, show me your way. Teach me your paths. Wisdom and creation go hand in hand. The creator of all that is spoke the words, "It was so, and it was good." That which is wise is life-giving. That which is not wise is life-diminishing. That gets us somewhere in our understanding of wisdom. The Bible also talks about righteousness and iniquity. Those are fun words in church, aren't they? Iniquity. For those of you who may have invited someone, for those of you who are here, perhaps visiting even for the first time, the preacher's talking about iniquity. There's an archaic religious word, right? Righteousness. The wisdom writers recognize. Righteousness means to be right with God, to be in harmony with God's will. Those who are wise, those who are righteous, are willing to disadvantage themselves in order to advantage the whole. That's considered biblical wisdom, a concern for the whole. Iniquity, iniquity is one who is willing to disadvantage the community, the society, the nation, the world, in order to advantage oneself. We're beginning to get glimpses into God's wisdom, the God of steadfast love. If wisdom is a disposition that is cultivated over time, how are we to cultivate this disposition? I'm going to submit to you what you already know, but how many of you know it's not that we need to be instructed again, we just need to be reminded from time to time of what we already know. That's the reason we gather to remember and remember. One body, many parts, remembering. Begins with humility. God of my salvation, the psalmist writes, show me your paths, teach me your ways. You are God and I am not. A recognition that we don't have all of the answers. And even the most informed among us, we can come to recognize that information in and of itself is not enough. A disposition of humility that God is God and I am not. Another aspect of cultivating wisdom is a recognition of who and whose we are. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my transgressions, God of steadfast love, but remember me. Verse 7, printed in your bulletins. Remember not the sins of my youth and my transgressions, God of steadfast love, but remember me. We need to remember who we are, who I am personally, who we are collectively. We are children of God. That is who we are. Our transgressions are not who we are. When we transgress, when we cross the boundaries, when we advantage ourselves at the expense of another, that's not who we are. It's part of our condition, but it's not who we are. We need to remember who we are. Created in God's image. Created in the one whose love is steadfast and unwavering. Ones who are committed to becoming who we truly are. Ones whose love is steadfast and unwavering. Willing to disadvantage ourselves if it will advantage the community. This next one is perhaps easy to understand in concept, but difficult to put in practice. We approach our interpretation of sacred text and reality with a hermeneutical suspicion. There he goes, he's flexing. He's been to graduate school. He's real smart, using those big theological words. I wouldn't do that. The concept is too important. Hermeneutics means interpretation. Suspicion means of ourselves. One of the great students of the human condition, Reinhold Niebuhr, says that self-interest is a significant part of the human condition. It lurks and can even convince us when we're being self-sacrificial that it is just that, when in fact, the elusive self-interest that resides within us all, it's often about us disguised as love. When we're interpreting a sacred text or a situation, we can ask ourselves, in what ways might I interpret this text or this reality in a way that will benefit me? And what would prevent me, therefore, from accessing it as it truly is? The final way I would submit to you this morning is to recognize that love is something we seek, wisdom is something we seek daily, love as well. Because wisdom is derived from love. Where there is no love, there is no wisdom. Where there is no love, there is no insight. Where there is no love, there is no peace. Where there is no love, there is no justice. Where there is love, there is wisdom. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is love, there will be justice. And we need it daily. Jesus prayed and taught us to pray for our daily bread, and he meant it in 3 ways. Give us our daily sustenance. Give us our work to do. Each one of us has work to do. Passing through Samaria, his disciples came to him. He had had nothing to eat, and he said, "My food is to do the will of the one who sent me and to fulfill his work." We are called to a daily contribution. But we also know that we do not live by bread alone, but by every word, every wisdom. We daily pray for wisdom daily. How many of you, like me, get too far ahead of yourselves? Jesus also said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough trouble on its own. There's enough trouble for today. And if we are engaged in the work of God, we know that this life can be challenging, can it? Because peace with God means restlessness with everything that is not God. Peace with God means restlessness with hunger. Peace with God means restlessness with discrimination. Peace with God means restlessness with injustice. Peace with God means restlessness with division. Peace with God means restlessness with an us against them, an oppositional mentality. We're restless if we have peace with God. And the only peace we find is by doing what God has called us to do today. And the only way we know what that is when we pray for our daily bread. What am I called to do today? Tomorrow has enough trouble for tomorrow. I'm fortunate that early on in my pursuit of godly wisdom, and I continue to seek it, and those who know me best know that I need to. But I would pray daily, and I was one of those young students of the Bible that I carried one with me everywhere I went, and I was constantly engaged. An early insight and experience I had, I was working with the young people in an after-school program at the YMCA. And I'd been working there for a little while, and to be honest with you, I felt like I was a little too old because those that I was working with, some of the other counselors, after-school counselors, they were 2 or 3 years younger than I was. I was about 22, and many of my friends were graduating from college, and they were starting their careers. And when people would ask me what I'm doing, I would say, I'm working at the after-school program at the YMCA. While many of them were graduating and starting their careers. And how many of you have ever felt just slightly inferior by that insidious comparison about what other people are doing and what they have and what you're doing and what you have? And I wonder how often we're motivated by that. Not by wisdom, but we want to be a somebody, don't we? In fact, that's what God has placed in each one of us. We are children of God. We want to be recognized as the somebodies we are. But we never consulted God's wisdom. There was a retired executive director of the YMCA, and in his retirement, he and his wife and another partner started the Bryant and Garrett Travel Agency. And because he was still engaged with the YMCA, he asked me if I would like to help him prepare for this big event that took place once a year for one full week at the Rome Forum. I was from Rome, Georgia, and this was the largest forum, and vendors would come from far and wide, and this was a big, big deal. This before you could just Google where you're going next and find out all about it. And I was hoping throughout that week that Mr. Bryant would invite me to come work with him, because that would look much better, and that would go over better at parties when I would see my friends that I hadn't seen since high school, and now they've graduated, and they ask me what I'm doing. I'm working from Bryant and Garrett Travel Agency. And lo and behold, he invited me to come work with them full time. But there was something in my spirit, for those of you who can receive that, there was something in my spirit that wouldn't give me peace. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Bryant. I felt like I need to stay with the after-school program. A couple of days after, I had a dream, the most vivid dream I have ever had before or since. For those of you who are getting distracted with the long-winded preacher, come back now, because this is an important part. The most vivid dream I have ever had before or since. I had a dream of a child. There was no place. It was not specific. There was a child in a body of water, and he was drowning. I did not know the child personally. I did not know his name, but I knew he was one of the children from the after-school program at the YMCA. He had a different counselor. He was not one for whom I was responsible. The next day, after I finished my van route, I went out onto the field. There were these soccer fields. I went over to where his group was. I picked him up, hugged him, put him back down, and his counselor came over and said, "What was that about?" I said, "I had this vivid dream. It was so real. I just wanted to put my hands on and make sure he was here and he was with us." 2 weeks later, it was spring break. So the kids were there throughout the day. And they had too many kids down in the pool area, which I was never a part of. But they invited me to come down to watch the kids that were on the side of the pool, because you know how kids can be, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. You get a bunch of them together and it can be chaos. And I looked over in the water, and there was a child in the water. And I thought, gosh, that child, to be so young, is so comfortable in that water, so graceful, almost angelic. His arms were out like this, and he was underwater, and he would start to get to the top, and then he would descend a little more, and then he'd come back to the top. And then I realized, because a siren, it was like a siren, went off in my head. And I said, "He's drowning. Brian, who is the lifeguard, he's drowning." Brian jumped into the water, swam him to the side, handed him to me. I pulled him out. He resuscitated him. And it was only then that I realized that was the child that I had dreamt about 2 weeks before. I learned 2 things from that experience. God knows the future, the past, and the present. God is eternal. God does not cause all things, but God is aware of them. And God is with us no matter what we're going through. The other thing I discovered is the importance of listening to that voice of wisdom. Even when it doesn't appear to be in our personal interest. We never know what God is trying to show us. We never know what God is trying to do in and through our lives. We never know how the God of steadfast love, the God of our salvation, not just in the afterlife, but the here and now, the importance of our humility, the importance of recognizing that we don't have all the answers, the importance of being willing to interrogate our own personal motives, the importance of praying for our daily bread. We live in a world in desperate and urgent need of wisdom. May we be people of daily wisdom right now, this moment, today. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for me. That's my prayer for all of God's children. Amen.